this has been a massive failure for English teams in Europe this year. They had 4 teams in the final last year, and everyone was talking about, oh, here comes the dominance of the 07-08 to 2014 period of English teams always being in the final or always being thereabouts. And it's been a complete failure for English teams in the European formats this year, Colm.
I don't know.
Come on, it has. They had one team in the quarterfinal. Come on.
You're allowed to lose matches, and it doesn't have to be this existential crisis every time. Like you can lose. I mean, last year it was last year was an all English final. Like it happens. I mean, they probably weren't having a similar part of German football last year.
Here's the point, Colm. The English Premier League notoriously calls itself the best league in the world. It's had one winner in the last 12 years. In the Champions League, where it is most important. When you're going up against the best teams in the world, the league that says it is the best league in the world has had one winner in the last 10 years.
But the best league in the world, Tag, it's just marketing that the players just go along with. That's fine.
People buy into that.
Yeah, but that's fans who get into it, and that's Twitter who get into it. I mean, like, the players won't have any interest in that. I mean, like, I would be more concerned if I was Bayern Munich. We haven't won it since 2013. This is Bayern Munich. And, I mean, for French football, am I right, top of the head, that the only French side to appear in the Champions League final in the 21st century is Monaco, 2004, where they got handsomely beaten by Porto?
PSG are their first team since 2004, Monaco to get to the final.
I'd be looking at other leagues, lads, ahead of the Premier League. I absolutely agree with you in the point that the Premier League is completely overblown with hype. Who can forget Red Monday a few years ago? Liverpool against Manchester United, the most boring Monday night football I've ever watched in my life. The Merseyside derby after lockdown, or when Project Restart got going, and they're just 2 games. But like, there's a lot of tripe in the Premier League. Like, you watch a lot of average games, and even like I was thinking Mason Greenwood's development, right, for Manchester United in the Premier League. Like, there's a lot of very compliant teams in the Premier League to allow someone with a bit of talent to develop very quickly. And I'm thinking of those Bournemouth and Aston Villa matches. I mean, Greenwood still obviously has the talent and has to produce it, but there's a lot of accommodating teams in the Premier League. There are. But having said all of that, there's 2 English teams in the final last year. We can't keep on saying every single season when an English team isn't in the final that it's an absolute disaster for English football. It's not.
Well, like, I don't think it's a disaster. I just think it's nice to see the Premier League taken down a peg.
What was the word you used at the start? Did you say disaster?
This year has been a disaster. I'm not saying it's an overall disaster for the Premier League. I'm just saying it was a disastrous year for the Premier League. When you've such a big budget in these teams, think of it, no teams in the world have the same budget as the Premier League teams. And they had one team in the quarterfinals of the competition who were beaten by the 7th best team in France. It has been a disaster for the Premier League this year. I'm not saying it is an overall disaster and they need to rethink the league, but this year's been pretty terrible.
I think it's been a disaster ender for Man City, given that Man City had so much expectation.
It's been a disaster for Liverpool as well.
Look, I think if Liverpool had knocked out Atletico Madrid, Liverpool would be in this final and getting ready to play against Bayern Munich. I think this Liverpool team, who got to back-to-back Champions League finals, will probably be back in another Champions League final, at least in the next couple of seasons. I still think that Liverpool are very probably the best team in Europe. I know that Bayern Munich are likely to be crowned the champions this weekend, but I would fancy Liverpool against Bayern Munich in a one-off game if that's what was happening on Sunday. And the thing about the Premier League is, look, the marketing is obviously overblown, and sometimes it's a bit nauseating for people to hear about the boastfulness about it being the best league in the world. But it's very difficult to make an argument for any of the other leagues actually being stronger. If you're using Europe as a pure metric, with the exception of the super clubs in Spain, who has really had any kind of success over a prolonged period in the European Cup. I mean, as Colm mentioned, Bayern Munich are looking to win the competition for the first time since 2013. Borussia Dortmund, who are their nearest challengers in the Bundesliga, have struggled year on year in Europe for the past few seasons since they reached that final against Bayern Munich. Serie A has been a complete non-runner. We're talking about Inter, the second best team, who are currently going into a Europa League final, and they're the first Italian team to get to the Europa League since it's changed the competition from the UEFA Cup. Juventus have flattered to deceive for many seasons, despite running off successive titles in Serie A. And like the strength and depth is not there in those leagues. Similarly in La Liga, I think once you go outside Atletico Madrid, notwithstanding that Sevilla, something magic seems to click when they go into the Europa League. They were in 4th place in Spain this year, and they're quite a distance away from Atletico Madrid and from Real Madrid and Barcelona. We've seen the two super clubs in Spain decline over the last couple of seasons, and even at that, Atletico Madrid look like they're at the end of a cycle. So I'm not sure which of the major leagues you could argue are any better than the Premier League. And even notwithstanding, if Lyon and Paris Saint-Germain got to the final, there's no way that Ligue 1 is as strong as the Premier League. You look at the Premier League where there's 6 or 7 big clubs.
Just to interrupt you for a second, the thing that annoys me is that people talk about the strength and depth in the Premier League. Is there the strength and depth in the Premier League? Are the teams is the 14th or 15th best team in the Premier League better than the 15th team in the Spanish league? There absolutely, people have been saying that the likes of teams mid-table Premier League size and below would be good enough to win the Europa League. They're just not, and that's a fact. And English teams have been proven wrong year in, year out, and it's something that people need to get out of their heads.
So you're saying then, Enda, that West Ham probably wouldn't beat Alaves or Leganes if they were. I'm
saying it would be a tight game. It would not be West Ham would not run away with that game. West Ham almost got relegated from the Premier League this year. They would absolutely struggle against a team like Alaves. Getafe, who finished 4th in the Spanish league last year, were laughed at when they were in the Europa League, and they did quite well. And that's the level that people need to look at the Spanish league. Spanish league is the closest when it comes to strength and depth to the Premier League, as well as the Italian league probably. Getafe, Alaves, all these smaller sides are just as good as Bournemouth.
Yeah, what about Espanyol, Enda, who finished
Norwich?
Espanyol were in the top 7 in Spain last year and got relegated this year.
But that just shows you like it's a little bit more competitive, doesn't it?
Hold on now.
It's a yo-yo league.
If West Ham beat Getafe, that would be seen as a great result for West Ham.
Yeah,
no?
Exactly. It absolutely would. That's my point, not your point. I mean, we agree so. Yeah, I agree. I disagree with Will because he thinks it would be a walkover for West Ham.
Did he say that? I don't know if he said that.
No, I think I said that West Ham would probably beat the 14th or 15th team in Spain. And I stand over that. I think they would beat the 14th or 15th team in Germany or in France too. It's the Premier League definitely, and this is part of the money. I mean, many of the teams in the bottom half of the Premier League will bring in more money and be able to recruit players at a higher level than most of the teams who are in the top half in Spain, Italy and France.
Why did Burnley do terrible in the Europa League then?
Because they didn't have the squad when they went into the Europa League.
But see, that's always the excuse. If they have the money, build the squad.
Hold on now. Sometimes an excuse is legitimate. Like if you don't have the squad, you can't do it.
But this is the thing. Burnley finished in the Europa League spot in the Premier League, and they got their arses handed to them when they went into Europe.
See, I think if you open the dictionary there, Enda, you would find reason as opposed to excuse. I'm not making any excuse for the way that Burnley performed.
Excuses. Anyway.
And I have a question I want to ask you. If this is a disastrous season for Manchester City, how would you rate Real Madrid's?
Well, they won the league, so it was pretty all right.
But Man City knocked them out.
Yeah, but you're talking about Man City, who didn't win the league, only barely scraped their way to this stage in the Champions League, and then lost, or they got past Real Madrid, but then they lost to Lyon. So it's a little bit different. Like Real Madrid came from behind. I think it was it 12 points at one stage in the season in La Liga to win the league. That's a pretty good season.
So
also they're not in good. I'm not saying that they're in good shape. They have a lot of rebuilding to do, but it's a much bigger season for Man City because this is the year they need to win the Champions League to be legitimised as sort of Pep Guardiola's success at the club.
But in Real Madrid, it's all about the European Cup. So would they not say, okay, we won the league and that was great, but like we failed and then some against Manchester City?
Like it's not a good season overall. Like it has been a stodged enough season for Zidane at Madrid anyway. But overall, the Spanish sides like Real Madrid and Barcelona, we know what they're like now. They need a rebuilding job because they've dominated Europe for 10 years.
If I can just interject here for a second, Enda's argument, which he's just made, is that it's a disappointing year for the Premier League, and we're talking about the champions of both Spain and Italy being humbled before they got to the semi-finals in Europe, getting knocked out by Lyon and Man City respectively.
Well, the champions of England got knocked out by the third place team in La Liga. Man City got knocked out by the seventh placed team in France.
And Atletico Madrid have knocked out lots of good teams in the last few years in Europe, and Liverpool will look back and it was a disaster, and really down to a couple of goalkeeping mistakes.
It wasn't a good result.
But hold on, Enda, Atletico and Liverpool have got to the same amount of European Cup finals this decade.
Liverpool are the champions of England.
So Atletico were champions of Spain in 2014.
No, Liverpool are the current reigning champions of England, and as they like to point out, they still, until Bayern or PSG lift the trophy, they're still technically the European champions as well.
This is a rather arbitrary way, by the way, to decide which league is the best, because no matter at what point you're knocked out in the Champions League or Europa League, if you don't win it, you've lost for that given season.
In that case, I'm going to move on, because we do actually have an actual final to preview.